right, so now Edmund Gettier. And this is being written in 1963. So this is 30, 40 years after Carnap. But Gettier is still in this analytic tradition, as most of the United States universities are. The public ones, anyway. And many of the private ones as well. Not the religiously affiliated ones, but the non-religiously affiliated ones. They're still heavily influenced by analytic philosophy, more so than continental philosophy also. And so most of the United States philosophers then kind of have these blinders on, like, oh my goodness, logic, 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 logic. Not thinking about the continental stuff out there. Logic, logic. So Gettier comes along and he says, wait a minute, maybe justified true belief is not enough for knowledge. We're all taken aback. Remember the definition we've been working with. Justified true belief, when we talk about each one of those aspects. Haven't yet talked about belief, but that'll be starting today and then moving forward. And so he gives two examples, Gettier does. Gettier-style problems, two examples that he thinks are examples where we have justified true belief, but we do not have knowledge, which means there must be something else, something missing, some fourth thing, at least, maybe even more than that. And what's interesting is this is 1963. From 1963 up until about the late 90s, so the next 30 years, every philosopher who is a philosopher is trying to figure out this fourth thing. This becomes the central question of all of philosophy, is what's the missing piece? And we'll see. And so Schrappe will give some of his bias here. Schrappe doesn't think that's what Gettier is actually doing. Gettier thinks that's what Gettier is doing. Schrappe doesn't think that's what Gettier is doing. Schrappe's not convinced there must be a fourth thing. Schrappe's convinced that philosophy needs to think long and hard and really try to figure out what the heck these other three things mean. I think that's what Gettier's examples really point out, among other things. Also, perhaps some of the limits of logic. So, case one. There was only two cases. This is a 2-page article that set the course for all of philosophy for the next 35 years. Suppose that Smith and Jones have applied for a certain job. And suppose that Smith, so let's pretend I'm Smith. Let's suppose that Smith has strong evidence for the following proposition. Jones, the other guy, is the man who's going to get the job, and the other guy, Jones, has 10 coins in his pocket. Now, why I know or care how many coins he has in his pocket, let's just leave that for another class. That's kind of weird, but whatever, okay? So he goes on, here's the evidence that I have. Right? I have good evidence, the justification portion. The justification for my belief that Jones is getting the job instead of me. The president of the company assured me that Jones would be chosen in the end. And I, myself, counted the coins in his pocket. And again, these may seem like two unrelated things. Person getting job and coins in pocket may seem unrelated. It doesn't matter for the rules of logic. This is those conjunctive things, those ands. There's no rule in logic which says they have to go together somehow. You can combine them with whatever you want. So, because I have good justification for my belief that Jones is getting the job, the president of the company told me so, and I have good justification for the belief that Jones has 10 coins in his pocket, I counted them myself, I therefore have good justification for the belief that the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket. When we think about logic, we also have to think about math, because these things are closely related. What's happening here is this is that FOIL method thing that you learned in math, right? So you got like 2 out here, x plus y or something like that. So you have to distribute the 2 to both of these, right? So you got 2x plus 2y. right? Hopefully you remember that or have seen that before. That's what we're doing here with justification. And maybe even belief as well. I'll combine these things here. That I have justification and belief that gets distributed. I have justification and belief that Jones is getting the job because the president told me so. And I have justification and belief that about the 10 coin bit. My justification and belief extends to both of those. Then, through the rules of logic, I can just combine these into, oh yeah, I'm well justified in my belief that the person with 10 coins in his pocket's getting the job. Here's Schrappe's problem with this. I'm not justified in my belief about somebody with 10 coins in their pocket anything. I'm justified in my belief that Jones is getting the job because the president of the company told me so. That's what my justified belief is about Jones specifically, not about some rando who happens to have 10 coins. Nobody actually makes this next step. Logically, can you? Yes. Does anybody actually? No. No one does that. And so again, perhaps what it does is call into question the meaning of justification, the meaning of belief. More so than, hey, there's this magical fourth thing no one thought about before. Why? Because here's where it gets tricky. It's tricky. Oh, it's tricky. All right. Let us suppose that Smith sees the entailment between, Jones getting the job and Jones has 10 coins to the person with 10 coins. All right, I see the entailment. Whoop-de-flippin-do. Again, not that I make that leap, but I see that I could if I wanted to. Great. But imagine, unbeknownst to me, I also have 10 coins in my pocket. Now again, why I know someone else has 10 coins in their pocket and don't know I have 10 coins in mine, I don't know. I have 10 coins in my pocket. Who knew? Fine. I'm the one getting the job, too. Imagine that unknown to Smith, he himself, not Jones, will get the job. And also unknown to Smith, he himself has 10 coins in his pocket. Therefore, it's true that the man with 10 coins in his pocket is getting the job. Uh-oh. That proposition is true. And remember, I was justified in my belief about it as well. But I sure as heck didn't know that I was getting the job. So there must be some magical other thing out here beyond justification and truth and belief. Maybe. Maybe there's something additional justified true belief. But Schrappe at least doesn't think that this demonstrates that at all. Right? I wish that Gettier had written this tongue-in-cheek. He didn't. But I wish that he had. I wish that this would have been some inside joke. But it wasn't. I don't know that I'm necessarily justified in my belief about a guy with 10 coins in his pocket who just happens to be me. Of course I didn't know it was going to be me. And that's Gettier's point. Look, you didn't know it even though it was justified and you believed it and it was true. I didn't believe I was getting the job. I didn't believe a person with 10 coins was getting the job. I believed that Jones was getting the job, and it just so happened that Jones had 10 coins in his pocket. And the rules of logic allow me then to make this logical next step to, a person with 10 coins in his pocket is getting the job. And if that one doesn't convince you, says Gettier, I've got another one. Case number 2. And here, instead of ands, we're going to be using ors. And like we talked about with the disjunctive syllogisms, these things don't necessarily need to be combined. Right? Drink Coca-Cola or be depressed. Those things have nothing to do with one another. And ad companies have made a fortune smushing the things together even though they don't go together. Just like with ands, the two sides of the or don't have to have anything to do with one another. So the second example, let's suppose that Smith has strong evidence that Jones owns a Ford. Here's my evidence, here's my justification for my belief that Jones owns a Ford. At all times in the past, within my own memory, Jones has owned a car, and it's always been a Ford. And Jones has just offered me a ride while driving a Ford. Pretty good justification. Let us now imagine that Smith has another friend. He probably has lots of friends when he gets promotion at work. Smith has another friend, Brown, of whose whereabouts he is totally ignorant. I have no idea where my friend Brown is. Now, this is before social media and all of that stuff. But even in 1963, if you had a friend who was somewhere else, they'd probably give you a call, send you a postcard. I don't know. Anyway, I have no idea where my friend Brown is in the world. So for whatever reason, I then select 3 places at random and construct the following 3 propositions. Again, I don't know who on earth actually does this, but Gettier claims, hey, you can do this. And logically, he's right. Logically, we could. Either Jones owns a Ford or Brown is in Boston. Either Jones owns a Ford or Brown is in Barcelona. Either Jones owns a Ford or Brown is in Brest-Litovsk. As long as Jones owns a Ford, the other part of the or doesn't matter, because what we have is an invalid pattern that tells me nothing. So just to refresh our memories about disjunctive syllogisms. Right? Either Jones owns a Ford or Brown is in Brest-Litovsk, for instance. Or both. Great, fantastic. And Jones does own a Ford. Tells me nothing about Brest-Litovsk. So the fact that this is invalid helps me here. Right? The fact that it's invalid tells me nothing about Brown's location. But as it turns out, Jones doesn't actually own a Ford. Uh-oh. Now we're in trouble. Go back to our Venn diagrams here. Ford or Brest-Litovsk. As long as I've got Ford, I don't know if it's both or Ford to the exclusion of Brest-Litovsk. That's what makes it invalid, remember. But as soon as I eliminate one of the possibilities, not Ford, Jones doesn't own a Ford, which eliminates 2 options here. Now, I know that Brown is in Brest-Litovsk. But I don't know where Brown is. I'm justified in the Brest-Litovsk if Jones doesn't own a Ford, which, by the way, it turns out Jones doesn't own a Ford. So all of my justification for Jones owning a Ford was incorrect, because that doesn't happen to be true. So I don't know that Jones owns a Ford. I was wrong about that. But since he doesn't own a Ford, now this other half of the or comes into question. Remember, I chose 3 places at random: Boston, Barcelona, and Brest-Litovsk. I don't know where he is, but I have justification for any of these 3 because I've randomly assigned them to Jones and his Ford. And apparently my belief about Jones owning a Ford also goes to all of these random locations I've chosen for Brown's whereabouts. Again, not sure that's how belief works. I don't know that I can believe Brown is in all 3 of these locations, or any of these 3 locations. But logically, I'm justified in believing all of them, because Jones doesn't own a Ford. If Jones owned a Ford, then I wouldn't have to worry about the justification for the second half of the or. The other part of the disjunctive syllogism. But Jones doesn't own a Ford. Screws everything else up. And, by the way, Brown just happens to be in one of these places. I forget which one it is, because it never really matters. Imagine the first is not enough Ford. By sheer coincidence, entirely unknown to Smith, the place mentioned in Proposition H. So he's in Barcelona. Oh, wow, great. So Brown's actually in Barcelona. I had justification because of the logical entailment of or. It happens to be true. I somehow believed that he was in one of these random places, so I had justified true belief, but I sure as heck didn't know he was in Barcelona. And philosophy for the next 30 years is trying to figure out, oh my gosh, Gettier's right. Justified true belief is not enough. We gotta have something else. What about time? Maybe it's knowledge at a certain time, going back to the empirical stuff. Maybe it's something else. There were any number of possibilities thrown out there. And Schrappe, at least, isn't sure that these demonstrate that justified true belief is not enough. Again, maybe it's not. But I don't think these cases point it out. These cases point out we have no idea what belief means, for one thing. And that justification may not actually be like mathematics in this way, where you can apply the justification for one premise to the and become the justification for a logically deductive next premise or conclusion or something along those lines. And this also raises questions about Schrodinger and that cat. I'm not sure we can believe that the cat is alive and also believe that the cat is dead. Any more than we can experience and believe those Gestalt things with the faces and the vase. Right? Do you see the two faces or the vase? That's an exclusive or, not an inclusive or. I can't see and experience both simultaneously. I can go back and forth between the two very, very quickly. Oh, faces. And I can't see both the faces and the vase at the same time. This is somewhat akin to what Dewey will talk about with regards to field and focus. That our consciousness has particular foci. It's going to focus on a particular problem. In the background, the field is going to be all of the other knowledge that we're using, but that we're not focusing on, right? Go back to Kant's house builder person, right? He's not focusing on gravity, but it's in the field of what he is focusing on. Field and focus. Right? What are we focusing on? Are we focusing on the faces or on the vase? Are we focusing on, are we choosing to believe, and that's William James who wants to talk about belief as a choice, are we choosing to believe the cat is alive, or are we choosing to believe the cat is dead? That again, perhaps the belief comes first, we choose to believe, then try to find the justification to back it up. Not the best philosophical method, but it is a method. We talked about that with regards to post-truth and so on and so forth as well. But I'll go ahead and stop here with Gettier, and then start the next video with the John Dewey excerpt, the John Dewey essay that I had you guys read forever ago when I thought it fit better there, but I think it fits better here now, the postulate of immediate empiricism. And we'll see what the American response to this analytic continental divide looks like. And what's going to be interesting is Dewey's actually writing about 20 years before Carnap and Heidegger are. But he's already sort of laying the groundwork for what some of the stuff Heidegger's doing. Sort of critiquing what Carnap is doing, but sort of doing his own thing. And as I mentioned before, Cornell West's dissertation, which was then published as a book, The American Evasion of Philosophy. American philosophy it's sort of doing philosophy and sort of not doing philosophy, not in the traditional sense. It's not doing subject-object stuff in the same way that continental philosophy or analytic philosophy is doing. It's sort of doing its own thing. All right, so we'll start that in a few minutes. That's it for this video.